So we're here with Trishana Healy, who I would say you are a mom to me, a spiritual guide, and a very, very strong life support in my life.
Wow, thank you.
You're welcome. And we're here with episode 27 of Live with Greg. All right.
Happy to be part of it, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you. So this seems like a place to start, because you were just talking a bit about patterns and stories, and I have a story to start with.
I would love to hear it.
Okay. There is a gentleman who's been by Whole Foods for a few months now, often with his wife and 2 children, and asking for money, with a sign. And I saw him today, and I thought, why don't you get a job? And maybe I can help you, go apply for a job. Just get a job and get past this. And that was my story I had about him. So I'm driving away, because that thought, as many thoughts do, was just a quick blip. But I thought, if I drive away, then I'm one of those people who had a quick thought that could have helped someone and just kept driving. And I don't want to be that person, and I have the time to stop. So I stopped. But then I heard his story, and he can't get a job because he is an illegal immigrant. He doesn't have the paperwork, and he's from Italy, and he's driving to Mill Valley from Sacramento.
Oh my!
Because he feels that the money is, more likely to happen there, and he's gone to the government. And so I heard his story, and I realized I had my story about his situation, which wasn't true at all, and my actions stem from that story.
Yes. So, what's the follow-through here?
Give up our stories. Find the truth.
Were you able to put him in any guide him in any direction, or I'm fascinated. I'm into it. He lives in Sacramento. Where is he living? Did you have time to do any more in-depth?
So there wasn't a lot of depth, and as we were talking, I could see his attention is also going to the cars driving by, because in essence he's looking for that revenue.
Yes, he's waiting.
Waiting. So I didn't feel like I could take a lot of time. But he told me he left Italy because he thought it was going to be better for his family here in the United States, the American dream.
The American dream. And the American dream, you can't get a job, you can't get a really good job without the green card.
He can't get any job unless it's like an under-the-table labor thing. He told me that he's experienced a lot of people who say they'll help him, and they give him their number and say, call me, I'll give you a job. And he calls them, and either they say wrong number, or the number doesn't exist, or...
And maybe they realize that because they can't hire him legitimately.
Maybe.
Gosh, and I know there's a lot of people in that situation. And the under-the-table thing is not a living. It's usually not very frequent, and he has a family. Oh my gosh. Yes, and it's interesting because you've gotten in touch with something of your idea of who he was.
Right.
And we all do this. We go through different things, looking at a person and trying to imagine what their lives are. Why are they panhandling?
Right.
Why? But then when you get down to it, and then it's on all levels, not just on homelessness, but it was like the story I shared with you, is that it was so clear because the lying was so constant. Constant in the sense that when an excuse was needed, the lie came out rather than whatever reality could have taken place.
And the excuse was to uphold the
perfection. The whole idea of trying to be perfect. So immediately I saw her in an entirely different light. And I saw that pattern, that unfortunate pattern, which she was too young to understand. And then as she got older, for one thing, she still had to lie to her mother about certain things to keep the mother happy. To keep the mother happy. And so she did that with employers. She did that with lovers.
Yeah.
She did that with husbands.
Do it with everyone.
It was everyone. And in between times, she was fine. You know, she was an excellent worker, excellent at her job. But she, you know, if there was any flaw, then it was an excuse, a reason why it didn't have any connection, because she was failing in the perfection model.
And what I find for myself is it's so easy for me to want a place that stops. Like, oh, the mother's the bad person.
Right.
But the mother has a story.
Exactly. And indeed,
and
so this particular mother does. And it's this whole thing about, go ahead.
No, I was just, so did you hear a bit of the mother's story then?
I did.
So
of course. Now, and that part was, just heartrending because Jewish background, leaving Europe, leaving Europe as a poor person, but not living in Europe as a poor person, and then trying to make a life here. When you're young and you're learning the language, which so much of our immigrants had to. They came from different places. People who spoke English, even with a heavy brogue or a burr, like the Scottish people and the Irish people, you could at least understand them to a certain extent. But I mean, all the ones that had come from Russia and Poland and England and Hungary and Italy, all those places, they had such a hard time. But when they came from comfort, but because they were Jews, there they were. They were thrown out into the world, and then they get here. They can't speak. They've got the desire, and the good part of this story is she and her husband became successful. I mean, she married when she was in this country. He was also an immigrant, and they made a very good life. But they had scars from the life that they had. And it's like the karma and reincarnation model. It's like, that supposedly is when we come into the earth plane, we have all these wonderful plans about how we're going to live.
Yeah.
And we're going to do this stuff right, and only as we're living our lives and we realize I couldn't possibly, because look at my parents. What happened with my parents? And then you look at their life and you're like, what happened to theirs? So no one was able to stay to the plan, and so therefore the wheel keeps turning, and we all eventually move forward, I believe, snail pace, to becoming aware. And then getting aware gets back to the sooner you become aware, the sooner you can start adjusting your pattern. But prior to that time, the pattern was building, building, and building. So and it gets to this place when you have this awareness, and then it's like, oh boy, where do I start chipping away? Where do I, or do I want to, or do I need to, or do I need to stick to this?
Right.
So it's life. And then we have friends, we have family, we get married, and all these patterns are intermingling. And we wonder why we have stress and strain.
Right.
I mean, do you wonder? No, I don't wonder anymore. But I'm an old lady now. And I figured out a lot of things, And I'll tell you what, somebody had asked me some time ago, didn't you ever want to remarry? I said, no. But I laid a plan out, to be fair, and I thought, well, I was married for a long time. I was married for 28 years. I'm going to be single for 28 years, and then I'll see which one I like. I'm still single.
Yeah.
It's 35 years.
Yeah.
So, we do figure things out as we get past a certain point. But there's always complexities.
So do you feel that right now, today, you are still working with complexities in your life?
I still see where I need work, that I have to work, that, for instance, you and I have talked a lot about the ego and things like that. And as I've always said, on your spiritual path, you make time for the meditation and things like this. And the ego, we live in an egocentric society. So what do we expect? The media all around us. It's like, you need this, and no, that's not what we really need. So we get pulled into things to where our first reaction may be from the ego. And in the beginning of the journey, the spiritual journey, you're not so much aware of it. But in that, ego reaction becomes judgment of someone else, of just that instant of, if I did that, that probably would make me, a lot happier. All these different things that will come in. And so what happens is, over time, you're eliminating some things. But if I were to sit here and tell you that my ego never acts up, I would be lying to you.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It's life, though. We're still here trying to get it right?
Right.
It's like when they talk about dysfunctional families. I've never met a functional family. So there's work to do on all levels. So we have a certain amount of dysfunction in ourselves. Pattern again. Mm-hmm. Changing the pattern. But I don't mind. I'm conscious of it, of the work. And it's easier. That's the only thing I can say. It's easier. I recognize when I have this egoic thought that I recognize, okay. I used to always have some wonderful retorts with people. Very fast, very, very funny, very ego-satisfying. Yeah, but I had to let those go. But that doesn't mean every once in a while when something comes up, I don't think of a quip. I just don't say it.
Now, I think there's an element where the quip can be spiritual. If you're in company with people who appreciate the wit and the quip. And
yes.
It's like a great sparring.
Yes, but see, that is a gentler sort. I was able to have some really cutting bobs. And I don't agree. with what I think you're saying.
I am saying that they're only cutting to the degree that the recipient
Oh, I see. Okay, yes.
is allowing it. Like,
oh, yes. Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Yes, because when I am, and this was true from when back in the day when this was part of my repertoire, so to speak. People who are on the same wavelength, it was funny.
yes.
It was funny. They could laugh. We both could laugh back and forth. I remember I had a brother-in-law, and he and his wife had this dog, and he was quite good to her, really. But he would call on her when they had this dog. Did you take the dog to training today? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. Good, good, good. And so this one night, I'm at dinner with them, and he said, "Did you take the dog to the training? I mean, this is normally the hour that did you change the schedule? Did you take?" "No, I didn't take the dog." And he said, "Oh." And I turned and I said, "Tom, she had a choice of spending this evening with 2 dogs, and she chose you." Now, he loved it. I mean, he fell over laughing. He just thought, and it eased the moment,
Right.
But that was an example of where you're on that same thing. But now I know that I don't have to do it. I mean, it was something that was always tempting. Always tempting. And I've just worked on it over the years, saying, that's very ego-satisfying. And I would recognize it, and I would say it to myself. It's very ego-satisfying. We'll let that go. We'll let that go. And that was throwing it each time, and it lessened and lessened and lessened. And that's what happens with everything. Every habit, when you start, you've made up your mind, let's say a smoker, and you decided to go cold turkey, or you decided to go with a patch or whatever. But those are the external things to an ingrained habit. You still inside want it. There's something that wants it, wants it, wants it. I have such great admiration for people who work on that and they let it go bit by bit. Maybe they fail a few times, but then they go back and they work on it and then one day they no longer have it. This is like, I haven't finished this story at all. It's still there. I can still go to it and add more to it. But I likened it to being a lion trainer, that the ego is the lion. And if you ever went to a circus and saw the tamer with the whip, and this magnificent beast wants to just, but it also knows it doesn't want to get hit, but it never loses the urge. And that's the important thing. The ego will never lose the urge. So as long as we're here, we work on it.
So the ego will always be the ego.
Yes.
Spirit will always be the spirit.
And it's just the nature of it. Just like a lion isn't going to, you can tame it and threaten it, but don't turn your back on it, because it's going to do something.
So for me, I think that biblical statement, the lion lays down with the lamb, is speaking to that step where truly the ego is completely let go of.
Yes. And so that must take place in heaven or someplace on some esoteric spot in the world, because we can see patches of it. But I've talked with, I met I don't know if she was a nun, a Buddhist nun. It was just kind of a casual thing, and I said, well, you are living. She was living in a community of like-minded people, and I said, well, now you all have like the same kind of practice. They have the group meditation, And group meditation is very powerful. I've always found it to be powerful. And yet, they still have these little niggling things that happen in between people. Okay?
Yeah.
So, but that's life.
Yeah. Right now, the way I feel that's unfortunate.
Oh, no, because you're still learning. I mean, it's perfection isn't.
Yeah.
If perfection is the goal, I don't think you'll get there. But if you can just feel yourself growing in the direction you want to grow, it's like anything that you are learning and you're getting better at, like math or a new language that you want to master. It's everything. It's that. But it's all life. It's all something. It's a substance of being right here and living and doing your best to live it with love and joy. And if you have that element, the more you can incorporate that, that's what I found. The more I could bring that into it, it lightens everything up, and that's my experience of it. But now I've talked a lot. Now you have to talk.
Well, talking about the quip, are you familiar with Sarah Silverman?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So she, there's the roast. It started off with, like Dean I think it probably goes back even further than
Oh, it
that.
does. It goes back to
The Friars.
that Jewish,
Catskills?
and I'm trying to think of the guy's name. You would recognize him. Sam.
Not Mr. Television.
No. Well, it does though. Burl. Yes.
Burl, yeah, but
Burl,
even back further.
yes, a little bit earlier. Eddie Cantor.
Okay.
Eddie Cantor and his sidekick. Well, he wasn't a sidekick. They are actually, I think they were kind of friends. I can't think of his name right now, but I think that's when it started. That's when it all started, and I don't think that they were. I'm not sure because I never watched one. I was never. You always heard about it the next day in the news, and I don't know that they meant to be really cruel to each other or really mean, but I think they got biting.
Right. So the way it is now is it's cruel,
Yeah.
but here's what the agreement is. Everyone's there in agreement.
Yes.
That this is going to be a nasty bit of business.
Yes.
And I saw an interview with Sarah Silverman, and she had some cutting barbs. And do you know Jonah Hill, the actor?
No.
He's, did you see Wolf of Wall Street, that movie?
I didn't see it.
Okay. Anyway, did you see Moneyball, about the A's manager?
No.
Okay. Anyway, Jonah Hill, he's a prominent A-list actor. He was one of the people on the panel that was going to roast, I think it was James Franco, another actor, and Sarah Silverman was on. And she went at Jonah Hill. She went at everybody, very cutting. And then he got up and he went after her, and part of what he went after was her age. And in an
Now, what's their difference in their age?
So she's in her 40s, and he probably at the time was in his late 20s or early 30s. And what I saw in an interview, a few weeks later, she spoke about it, and she said how it really hit her. But the way she held it was kind of like what you're just saying. The reader's died. The footnote is she held it like, oh, I still have work to do, because look at this.
Yes.
It rocked my world.
Yeah.
And she said, I don't fault Jonah, because that's what we were all there for. That's what we were all in agreement for, is we were going to go for the jugular. That's what it's about.
Okay.
But she was surprised by how hard she got hit. She said there was about a week of processing where she was sort of rocked. But it's kind of like the quote from Nelson Mandela, that all those years of being locked up, he saw as an opportunity. And that's the way she held it. Like, oh, look, here's something for me still to work on that's pretty deep roots. And that, if you're in community where people can hold it that way, I think the cut
it could bring awareness. It could shine a spotlight on something that you've not thought about, maybe never recognized in yourself.
Right.
Never.
Like we mentioned briefly when I first got here, like what I'm going through. And there is an element that I recognize that this was a deep fear from when I was 9 years old of divorce.
My goodness. Yeah.
And, of course, it's something I would hope never having to face, but I also see that in the path of wholeness, we don't want any dark rooms with a locked door that no one enters.
Right.
So eventually the light's got to shine in there.
It really does. And I don't know if, I can only speak for myself in the aging process, that I just got freer. I remember for my 50th birthday, I just invited everyone, and we had a potluck, and it was in Hayward, and it was the most wonderful thing. And my friends are saying, "Are you really doing this? You're going to let everyone know you're 50?" I never had to think about age. It's a number. It's all. And it's just like, okay, you're opening up to another decade, and then you get through that, and then another one if you're lucky enough, like I am. I feel tremendously lucky to be in my 80s, to be able to have opened this door and to see what still is, and to feel wonder and joy, and the sorrow is a different kind. It's not that deep loss that I remembered all through growing up. The loss of so much, the loss of family. It was so keen, it was so present. And it's just like 40 was like an opening, and 50, it's your heart still feels for people around you who are experiencing things. You still know what they're going through, or have an idea of what they're going through. But you don't bury yourself in it. You don't cover yourself in it. You just continue to find the joy where you can find the joy. And then the joy, and of course many years ago I started this with sending blessings just to any situation, no matter what, a person walking down the street with a bad limp, or it was like, oh, blessings. To me, this is what getting older has meant. It's been, the joys are keener, and the sorrows are so much softer. They're not piercing. They're not. It's the only way I can describe it, I think. And I think it all comes with, this is all part of the journey, and you start seeing it in a different way, because I can look at people and know what they're going through. I'm seeing you and seeing everyone, or my kids and everything. I went through all that too. And there was probably someone older and wiser than me who was saying, oh, if I could only tell these people that it's, you never get over it, but you understand it, and so it's a different emotion. Well, it is for me. I can only speak for myself, but that's like the gift of getting older.
Do you think the understanding can even be held in extreme cases of darkness? And without, if you want examples, it's super easy. We live in a time now where politics are very volatile and crazy.
Yes. Yes.
And so we can look at the history of the United States, for instance. There's some historical shames.
Oh, yes.
That are very prevalent still today.
Oh, yes.
Do you think they can be held with understanding, like you spoke of? So you spoke of for yourself from a personal. Can that be broadened out to such a vast element, and in the understanding can peace and healing happen?
What I was talking about was, of course, my life experience. So I wasn't at that point thinking in terms of world events as such, but considering human nature and considering where we have come from, Attila the Hun and the Picts and all this. In one sense, our world has never been without terrorism. It was in a different time and in a different way. So it was like always there. So there was always some darkness. There was, I had a friend, a Jewish man who was a psychiatrist. And he was deep into his religion. And he always was talking about the battles of the forces of the good and the evil and all of this. And I would listen to him because he was passionate in speaking about it and the rebuilding of Jerusalem, and the whole thing. And I would just listen to him and think of going back, as you were saying, okay, the history of our country, yes, we know that. We can, that's close to us.
Mm-hmm.
But going back even farther, I think it's all been a process of coming to light. There's always something there that's dark.
Yeah, because I was thinking about the African American situation in slavery here in the United States, and I was thinking of my people, and my people were slaves in Africa. They were enslaved by Africans.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, with Egypt.
I see. Yes. Of course. Yes.
So if we take big chunks of history,
yes,
there really isn't a righteousness for any culture to stand on.
No, there really isn't.
Which is great in a way.
Well, it is, because it gives you the, it's like seeing the entire tapestry of life,
right.
And to see where the gold threads come in, where it's very, very dark and shadowy, and then these beautiful bucolic scenes of animals, in the fields, and just being so peaceful, and our entire history. And we are all touched by the energetics of terror in our present age. And so our fields are always felt. We always, no matter where it happens, it reverberates, and we do feel like 9/11. It happened in New York. It was felt all over. And it just hit our fields, and it reverberated. And it's much harder to get a grasp on that moment and the years even afterward, as the healing has tried to happen, but it can't happen completely because of the upset in our entire world, and we're now a global community. But looking to the past and seeing the pattern, we shouldn't be startled that there is still terrorism in our world. It's just taking a different form. And how do we deal with it? And it has to be, it's like that wonderful song, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." So the peace has to happen inside here. We have to be able to drive our cars down these terrible freeways and not curse and not scream and not lay on the horn because this is all happening. That's where we have to begin. We have to become peaceful within ourselves. It starts with dealing with any anger issues we have. We have to deal with them here because everything, there's the individual, then there's the basic unit of society, which is the family. So we have the family here. And then out into the community, out into the state, out into the country, out into the world. And if the individual hasn't done the work here, this is what we have. This is what we're living with. This is what our politics are about. It has to start here. And you can change the word peace to "that there be love, and let it begin with me, that there be joy." Because I believe we are inherently loving, peaceful, and joyful. But it's all this other stuff that happens. But that's the work. That's what I see as the work. You know, you don't have to buy any special creams or food or anything. That, I love crystals, but I'm not going to rely on crystals to change my inside. I have to work to change my inside. I can admire the crystal.
I keep laughing because what keeps popping into my mind is a McDonald's Happy Meal. And if only it was so easy and cheap.
There you go. There you go. But it's, that's the advantage that I can see from being elderly. And I love it. I love it that through the journey of my life, of losing my mother, and then what I call the year of starving, and then the first orphanage, and then the second orphanage, and the blessing of that second orphanage, and how my life was changed from that point going onward. At the time, did not seem like a blessing. You're in the middle of it, and in the middle of it, you cannot appreciate all that's really going on. But if you can look backward and see where the gifts and the blessings and the graces, that contributes, I think, going up the line to your older years, where you can still look at life joyfully and even more joy, even knowing that we live in a very imperfect world. But if we understand, it comes back to the individual. That's powerful.
Yeah. That's
powerful that you and I can help, that every individual can help. And if a community, for instance, if we were so aware that we did take care of ourselves through our churches, through our community centers and things like that, we would notice how the changes take place in families and in the communities. And then outward, it does work that way. it's like these conductors that have this enormous orchestra of these talented musicians, and this one person up there, he is directing, and he's trying to bring everything in harmony, and they've all worked very hard to make their contribution to this whole. So what we in the audience appreciate gives us shivers because it is so beautiful. But the world could work that way too.
Yeah.
If we all worked very hard to produce something beautiful.
What comes to mind is that, as you said, it starts with the self. Let it begin with me. That orchestration, that music needs to be alive within you 24/7
Oh yes.
for
yes,
it
yes.
to be
That's
heard.
where the awareness comes in. Is to live consciously, to do everything consciously, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's work. It's the work. The work is to find the love in oneself and to see it in others. It's like the movie Avatar. I didn't see it. I only saw the trailer. When it came out, it was only in 3D. And I was having vertigo at the time, so I could not see it. But I saw the trailer, and the most important thing that I could have drawn from that movie was what I took from the trailer was, I see you. I see you. I see the holy essence, the spirit of you. And if I'm relating to that spirit, the ego doesn't have a chance to, get involved.
Right.
And it's hard, and it is the work, but I love that. I see you, and then it's that whole, the namaste. I see the God in you, or the goodness in you, or whatever it is that you call it. I see it, and we are the same. When I see that in you and I see that in myself, we are the same. We are the one. It's easy to say. It's
Right.
real easy to say.
That's what I love about partnership, is being in partnership, whatever partnership it is, where when I'm at a weak point, where I'm embodied in my ego in the moment, and someone can see my spirit still, and they're holding that.
Yes.
And that helps me to move.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Yes. And we can do that for each other if we remember to see,
Yeah.
to see. And if you make an experiment of it, which I have done, I'll give you an example. I was working at Quantum in Hayward as a temp job. And I was kind of secretary, receptionist, whatever they needed me for that day. And the administrative assistant came over and she said, well, I have a job for you, but I want to tell you, I hate sending you down there because this woman is an absolute bitch. She is just horrible to everyone. And so I had this cart, we had an elevator. I had this cart with all these different things that had to be copied. And this was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was to bring this down to this woman and ask her if it could be finished by 4:30 in the afternoon. So immediately I started saying, please give me your blessing, perfect and holy child of the universe. And I just kept saying that. It was in my mind. And I get down to the place, and then there's like a Dutch door, so this part's open, and I see a person clear across the room. And so I rang the bell, and this woman turned around, and she just almost like a snarl, and I was just smiling at her. And she turned around again and she walked over and she said, "Oh, I haven't seen you here before. You must be." I said, "Well, I'm just a temp, and so I have come down with all these things to be copied." And I said, "It's a lot. I don't know how busy you are, and if you have anything that I should relay to the people upstairs." I said, they'd like to have this done by 4:30. She looked at me and she said, "Not a problem. Let me have your number so so I can call you." And I did have my own phone at the desk. Absolutely, totally beautiful experience. And I just was addressing her spirit, and she got it.
That's where I think, like the lion tamer. Of course, if someone's whipping me and holding a chair at my face, I'm going to be snarling and wanting to bite the head off.
Of course.
But the lion can lie down with the lamb.
It can be. We can be at peace, but then again, we all have to be on the same, wavelength, and that's the difficulty.
That's where I think an enlightened being, they just are. They are enlightened 24/7, and the external doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. I haven't met anyone that's done that exact. And I think that anyone, I know some, or I don't know anymore, but I've met some wonderful people that to me were highly evolved, that they were able to dispense some wonderful healing advice, and you could see the peacefulness within themselves. There was a bookstore up in Mount Shasta, and I have to have some water. Feel my throat. They had taken over this couple had taken over this bookstore, and they were on their seriously on their spiritual path. The woman was, he was quiet, reserved, always had, he was approachable. And she was fun. I mean, she just was this electric person that she buzzed around and got everything done, But she did her meditation, but this was her nature. And I went in there one day. I was up there with my friend Jean, and she was in a gem store, and I went over to the bookstore. I was the only one in there. And this man, I mean, I swear there was light coming from him. He was sitting in his chair, and I think he was probably just meditating. And then, of course, you can hear the bell. And it was like he came up from some depth and just smiled and said, "Hi, welcome. Is there anything I can help you with?" And that was such a beautiful moment in a setting. You can see it in a monastery, right? But here it was in this wonderful little bookstore.
Oh, you were at Mount Shasta.
Yes, I love that place. I love it. We used to go up on the mountain to meditate.
Yeah.
We had a thought.
Well, what I realized is, because I had a thought that experience in Marin City, in a homeless camp, and that interests me, because as you said, like in a monastery, there's spiritual environments that were created with spirit in mind.
Yes.
And so I think the intentionality supports the strength.
And they don't have the same pressures of the world.
Right.
I have to tell you, this is from Ram Dass. a story that he had told at one of the meetings that I had, or what did they call them? I don't know, gatherings. And he, of course, he had gone to India, and he had gone through, a few years of meditation and working with the guru. And the guru told the story. After you are in the ashram and you're doing all this meditating, you're eating only certain types of food and at certain times, and you get this feeling, oh, this feels so wonderful. So he told about one of his, what did they call him? One of the people who had come for the training, I can't think of the word right now. He was progressing very well, becoming, just very, very holy, just, always walking like this. And the guru called him this one day and he said, now, you have come to the point where I think that you must now go up to this particular mountain, and there is this cave there. This is where he sent people. You're going to be there by yourself. You are going to be fed by people who you will have to beg for food, or you will eat the berries, you will, eat the roots, whatever. And you will be in meditation, you will be one with nature. And so he did that for 6 months, and he came back, and he was holier than ever. And the guru said, now, the next assignment for you is you are going to go to New York City. There's an apartment already there for him, and it's in the midst of everything. And in 3 days, he's lost all of his holiness. He's ranting and raving because, of course, when you are away from the center of life, the ajita of life, it's very easy to be very holy and very pious. But when you are thrown into the midst of life and you can't stay that way, then you haven't achieved what you thought you had achieved. And this was the whole lesson of the guru, trying to bring the person down to one's nature, and how the importance is, like thinking of the mystics that live in our large and thriving cities. Those are the people who are making their path in a very healthy and meaningful way, because they're still having to deal with all the stuff of life.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? I love that story.
For you.